Today you become a Han Dynasty Imperial male favorite. At 17, the Emperor summoned me into the warm hall. 3 years later, I rose to Grand Marshal. And at 22, when he died, I ended my own life with my own hand. I was born into a poor miner clerk's household just outside Chang'an, the kind of place where unhulled rice was rare, and my father wore the same patched coarse hemp robe through every season of every year. My mother wept the whole night I was born, because our family had one more mouth to feed, and she could no longer scrape together half a peck of unhulled rice to last the household through the coming month. When I was 6, a brutal drought struck the Guangzhou plain. 3 neighbor children starved one after another, and my father stared up at the smoke-blackened ceiling beam night after night without a single word. In the spring I turned 8. My father arranged through a friend to send me into the magistrate's residence as a small page, and from that day on I never returned to the village outside Chang'an again. The household steward lifted my chin under the hanging bronze lamp and studied me a long while, then said quietly that this child had clean, elegant features and could be kept on for inner service. On the morning I entered the magistrate's residence, my mother slipped me a cloth bundle holding half a cold wheat cake and the 2 round bronze wuzhu coins she had saved in secret over 3 long years. In the residence, I learned to copy official documents and serve tea and grind ink, and my eyes had to learn to read the shifting moods on every grown man's face at every hour of the day. When I was 12, I finished reciting the Book of Songs and the classic of filial piety, and my tutor said my voice was clear enough that one day I might be recommended into the Imperial Academy. When I was 15, I shot up to my father's height, and the whole residence agreed that my face was as fine as that of the most beautiful young man in all of Chang'an. A palace eunuch visited the residence one evening, sat watching me under the lamp for a long time, and the very next morning, he sent men to measure me for a brand new set of clothes. When I was 16, the eunuch led me into the imperial palace, saying he would place me in the imperial secretariat as the lowest-ranking junior gentleman to follow him from then on. My work in the secretariat was copying memorials and carrying documents, rising at the 5th watch each dawn and only returning deep at night to a single narrow on-duty cell. I worked a full year in the secretariat and no one remembered my name. They all simply called me that quiet, handsome little junior gentleman who copied the documents. On a spring night in the year I turned 17, the emperor passed by the secretariat, paused his step, and softly asked me which memorial it was I was copying in my hand. The very next day, the emperor summoned me into the warm one-shire hall, poured me a cup of wine with his own hand, and asked whether I was willing to stay close at his side and serve him. I knelt and pressed my forehead to the floor and said I was willing, and he smiled and personally untied the plain bronze seal cord of a lowest-ranking junior gentleman from my waist. That night the lamps in the warm hall burned until dawn, and the palace servants whispered the emperor had not been so delighted with a young man in many, many years. On the 3rd day, the emperor invested me as a yellow gate gentleman and personally gave me a slender green jade belt hook fetched from the South Sea to pin at the collar of my new crimson silk gauze robe. When I was 18, the emperor and I rode together in a single imperial carriage, and he held my hand in full view of the assembled court without the slightest concealment. One afternoon, I fell asleep on his sleeve, and rather than wake me, he drew his short sword and cut away the embroidered dragon sleeve pinned beneath my body. From that day, the 2 characters cut sleeves spread through all of Chang'an, and the whole realm came to know that the emperor's heart held only me alone. When I was 20, the emperor named me palace attendant and bestowed on me a grand mansion on the Vermilion Bird Avenue that had only ever been granted to royal princes before. When I was 21, the emperor raised me to Grand Marshal, the highest military office in the Han realm, a title previously given only to imperial maternal uncles and consort kin. My father was made marquis within the passes, and our whole family rose overnight from a minor clerk's household outside Chang'an into the most powerful new gentry in the capital. In early summer of the year I turned 22, the emperor suddenly fell gravely ill, and he gripped my hand and whispered that he wished to hand the whole Han realm over to me to rule. I knelt at his bedside weeping and refusing. But those words were overheard by the palace staff lining the hall, and by the next day, they had reached the ears of Wang Mang himself. Wang Mang was the nephew of the Grand Empress Dowager. He had been quietly cultivating power at court for 20 long years, and he was simply waiting for this single chance to settle accounts with me. In the 6th month, the emperor died inside the Weiyang Palace. And that long night, the lanterns of the warm hall went dark one by one until only I remained kneeling at his side. Before dawn even broke, the Grand Empress Dowager issued her decree, ordering attendants to seize back the gold seal engraved with the 3 characters Grand Marshal from my hand at once. On the day after the decree, Wang Mang sent men to raid my mansion, claiming I had used the emperor's favor to secretly seize vast tracts of imperial farmland inside the Shanglin hunting park. They ransacked every chest and chamber and took away all the gifts the emperor had ever given me, and they stripped my father even of the bronze seal of his marquis within the pass's title. I knelt in the dust on the highway outside Chang'an and looked back once, and the grand mansion the emperor had bestowed on me had already been sealed shut with thick vermilion court papers. That night, the whole family was driven to a dilapidated old house in the southern suburbs of Chang'an, a place so derelict we could not even spread out a single clean sleeping mat. The ministers who had once delivered name cards to my gate every day all switched allegiance overnight, and not a single one of them dared come to visit me in the southern suburbs again. On the 3rd day after the move, my father coughed up blood and died. My mother wept until her eyes nearly went blind, and we had no money left to give him a single proper funeral rite. I sent my mother out to the countryside beyond Chang'an to seek shelter with a distant relative, and I stayed behind alone to wait for the next imperial decree that would surely come for my life. Wang Mang's messenger arrived at the broken doorway not long after, holding out a sealed silk scroll declaring that the Grand Empress Dowager ordered me to return every office and title at once. I recognized every single character written on that silk scroll, but together they formed a single death order commanding me to take my own life, right then to make my apology to the realm. I knelt before my father's newly made wooden ancestor tablet and lit 3 sticks of bronze incense, and told him the whole story of my life from age 8 all the way to 22. I asked my servant to fetch the green jade belt hook the emperor had given me long ago and place it on the low table, and that was the last fragment of dignity I kept for myself. At night, I held in my palm the 2 old bronze wuzhu coins my mother had pressed into my hand long ago, and those were truly all the luggage I had carried from childhood until that night. I finally understood that even the warmest lamp inside the Chang'an Palace could not reach this drafty, broken house in the southern suburbs, that the favor I had received was never truly mine. Before dawn, I dressed in the last crimson silk gauze robe the emperor had ever given me, then carefully gathered my long hair and pinned it neatly in place with the slender green jade hairpin. I had my wife pin the green jade belt hook at my collar with her own hand, and I told her not to come look at me the next day, but to slip quietly out of Chang'an alone. She fell to her knees and embraced my legs sobbing, weeping that she wished to walk this road with me. But I shook my head and said this final road I could only walk alone. I stepped into the inner chamber and slid the old wooden door shut, and on the low table sat a small white porcelain cup containing the imperial physician's hand-prepared poison wine. I lifted the small white porcelain cup and drank it down in a single breath, and after a faint sweetness across my tongue came a burning agony rising straight to my heart. I finally understood that the most beautiful figure in the Han Palace was not the youth standing beside the emperor, but the self that no one in this whole world could ever touch again. And that was the life of a Han Dynasty Imperial male favorite. If you too have ever given up everything for the words of one other person, leave a comment below. Next episode, choose a Tang Dynasty princess sent for political marriage or Ming Dynasty embroidered uniform guard spy. Vote in the comments. This film is fictional and for entertainment only.